Okay, so my last couple of videos I made leading up to this point were really boring. Apparently I have a very boring voice. Anyway, so here are the materials we're going to use, and I'm probably going to start everything over from scratch. We have different types of foam. This is an Eva foam mat that you can buy at Harbor Freight, usually on sale for about $6, but not on sale. I think they're $7.99. It's 12 square feet, and it's very long. It comes in a roll. Your only problems when you're buying this at Harbor Freight, because everything's pretty cheap there, is you want to look for a consistency of thickness when you're buying your foam. Sometimes some of the edges get really thin, and it doesn't give you a lot to work with if you decide to remove one side of it. It's basically, as you open it up, one side is a finished diamond plate finish. It's sealed. The other side is smooth. It's a good thickness, and this is ideal for your helmets. Once you get it bent into shape, this finish side helps to keep that shape, but if you don't do it correctly, it also helps to re-correct the shape. So as we go, we may or may not remove this diamond plate finish, but this does prevent the absorption of, say, sweat. If you were to wear something out at a convention and you perspire, that smell is going to get in the foam and stay in the foam. The next one we have is anti-fatigue mats. It's the same type of foam as the other roll there. This also is at Harbor Freight. You can get this for about $6 or $7. Normally it's $10. Comes in 4 squares that are 2 foot by 2 foot pretty much. What this one is it has a different finish on one side. It's almost like a carbon fiber looking finish if you paint it correctly. The other side is a smooth finish. It's a lot thicker, and this is ideal if you're going to make armor or thick pieces on a helmet. Not really ideal for any of the stuff that we're going to be working with. But this is it's a good foam. It holds its shape up a lot better than, say, the little bit thinner foam because it is denser. Next, what we've got is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of hobby foam. This is the same thickness as the roll if you were to remove the diamond plate from it. This is a very clean finish on both sides. It holds its shape up a lot better than the rolled foam because it's a little denser, but it doesn't absorb nearly as well as the other Eva foams. So it doesn't absorb the adhesive that you're going to use quite as much. So we're going to need more adhesive to make these pieces stick together. The next piece we have is a very thin, fun hobby foam. You can get this anywhere, like Walmart. You can get it at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, fabric stores carry this foam. This is basically just for details, but it is also very smooth and very finished, and doesn't absorb the adhesive the same as this other foam. This one you probably have to go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby to pick this up. It's usually like $1. A fabric store here has it for $2. Hobby Lobby and Michael's has it for $1. This usually comes in a large pack. It comes in different sizes. It comes in different shapes. I usually just buy these large sheets. And the adhesives you can use for all these different types of foam is you can use super glue. Super glue is expensive, and it is a pain in the ass to work with, and if you get really down in there and you're doing a lot of gluing, you can get a little contact high. Or you can use hot glue. Hot glue is non-toxic. It's easy to use if you're in the house. There are some problems with hot glue that I don't like, and I'll show you what those are in a second. The next is a contact cement. I would use either this DAP flammable, regular contact cement. There's a gelatin version of this you can use, which is really good as well. What you want to avoid is the green labeled non-flammable contact cement. It does not work for shit. You can buy a leather contact cement called Barge, which works even better, but we're not going to have any problems with this contact cement working with this particular kind of foam. The pros to using this is you get a really nice finish. The pieces pretty much glue perfectly together, and it's very flexible. You basically have the same flexibility as if it's one piece of foam just cut at an angle. It's great. What you get with super glue is you get a really crisp, crunchy edge. You can sand this down if you need to, but if you really want to bend it, it's going to be bending at a really sharp degree. It's not as smooth, it's not as fun. If it crickles and cracks, it can lose a little bit of its adhesive, and you can get little gaps in there. Hot glue, well, hot glue, you can see it leaves a crease in the middle because only where the hot glue attaches is where it's going to stick. Because it comes out of a gun, it's really hard to get this to everywhere you want for the adhesive. So you're going to have little gaps. You can fill that in with caulking. You can add super glue after the fact. It is kind of a pain. But most people, when they use hot glue, they'll hot glue the two surfaces together and usually put a bead of hot glue along the back. The problem with that is hot glue, if it gets a little hot, you can pull it apart really easily. If you leave it in your car and you have hot glue, pieces may come apart. So I recommend using contact cement, rubber cement. The problem is if you're in the house, you do have problems. What we're going to use is a felt tip regular Sharpie. I'm going to use a black one. I have a silver one if need be, but if you use this on the foam, you will not leave indentions on the foam. If you use a ballpoint pen or something that's a little harder, as you're making lines in the foam, it will leave a mark in the foam, and we don't really want to do that. I'm going to use just a basic box cutter and extra blades because the foam really does your blades really fast, and a metal ruler. And what we're also going to use on this is a heat gun. If you use the heat gun on the foam, it helps to seal the unfinished side of the foam, and it makes it more malleable so you can actually bend the foam into the shapes that you want, and it also helps to dry the contact cement. So we're going to use it for a couple of different uses, but it's really good to have a hot gun or a heat gun, not a hair dryer. The hair dryer isn't going to get the foam at the point where it's as flexible and will hold its shape after it cools down as a heat gun. So these are the tools we're going to use, and I'm going to pull the pattern out and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I've got my pattern completely cut out. All the pieces that I've printed off of the Pepakura designer, this is everything that it comes with. It came with like a couple lens pieces, which I'm not going to use on this particular one. The lens pieces are basically there just to hold the shape while you finish your piece, and then you cut the eye lenses out after the fact. But these are so narrow, and the way this particular model is, I'm not using them because it's not going to be needed. If you notice, I did have to cut and piece the pattern together because this prints off on regular pieces of paper, 8.5 by 11. If you have bigger paper, you can set it up to print larger. But the bottom line is, because of the size of these, you're not going to get what you need to print on a basic piece of paper. Also, on this pattern, you're going to have lines. If you notice, there are regular dotted lines. Oh, this phone sucks. What this means is the pages are going to fold over. With foam, you can't really do that because you're going to have a curved edge, and the foam doesn't really bend on itself because it's thick. Some of the other pieces you'll notice, they're a little bit different. They're a dot and a dash, a dot and a dash. That is a fold up. Since we can't use that on this particular build because it's going to be foam, we're going to cut some of these pieces and then reattach them at an angle. For instance, this piece here is separate from here, but it's attached down here. On the actual helmet, it's a separate piece. This entire piece is a separate piece because the brow comes to a very sharp point. This piece and the brow piece are going to be separate pieces, whereas on the pattern, the brow piece and this piece are simply folded over, and it's not going to work. So we have to cut the brow off of the forehead piece, cut it at an angle, reattach it so we get that nice crisp line. Now if you'll notice, most of this is pretty symmetrical. It's a very, very sharp edge. This piece here is also attached permanently there. I'm going to cut this piece to be separate because there is no way I want the face and the head, everything. I don't want it all to be exactly put together because on this helmet, the face is going to come off. Also, on this pattern, if you look at it, this piece is expected to be cut out. There's a line to cut this out. It is not a dashed line, it's a solid line. And we are not going to cut that out. The reason we're not going to cut these pieces out is because the ear pieces that we're going to make need that surface so that these round pieces can glue to that surface. Most of the foam builds, you're not going to cut out parts that you normally would for paper because you need that surface to attach other pieces to. And another thing that I made a mistake on this helmet, on the model, these pieces are layered. They're not the same, or they're not supposed to be smooth and the same distance. On the Ironman helmet from the movie, this piece is indented a little more, and this piece is indented a little more to that. So what we're going to do on here, there are lines for folds. We're going to cut along those lines, and we're going to recess each piece as it goes to give it kind of a scaled, nice look. And this is really good to have a model of something to look at while you're doing your build so that you know what details that you're going to have to come up with some creative way to add to your helmet. This is a very basic build. This frame is very simple, and it's very boring if you don't actually take the time to put details into it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this apart into individual pieces so that you can see what pieces I'm going to glue together and how I'm going to get the edges. Okay, so I've cut apart my pattern to the way I want to make it. I've cut the back part into two pieces so that they can be three-dimensional. I've cut the cheek pieces off so that they can go on separately, and I'll be able to get this nice little corner here as they come together. I've cut this, I don't know, crow's peak. The side piece of the helmet separately. This is part of the face, which also attaches to the side of the helmet. I've cut that separately. I went ahead and cut the chin piece because this is actually at an angle. This is this piece here, and you'll need to get that corner and that edge, and you can't just fold it. So that's the way I've cut all the pieces. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take these pieces and trace them onto the foam, and then I'll show you some of the angles and some of the cuts that we're going to do to the actual foam. Before we put this on foam, I want to interject real quick. There was only one of these pieces on the pattern that we made. This is the very top head piece. It's this piece here for this helmet. The reason there's only one is a lot of the patterns that people print for foam is they'll print one expecting you to take this piece, flip it over, and make a second piece. So this piece is a little bit obscure. You'll flip it over, you'll use this basically on both sides. Also, the very ear pieces on the helmet, before I get started, you'll see that there's one earpiece that prints also. I did not print this earpiece off, and I will show you later as the build comes why I didn't even go with the earpiece that came with the pattern. Okay, and now we're off to the foam.